Hello, friends. This is Confessions with Amy. Here we share new confessions every day.
You're not our real mom. The moment those words slipped out of Quinn's mouth, I felt the ground beneath me crack open like a chasm swallowing my entire world. I was sitting at the kitchen table in our modest but cozy home in Asheville, North Carolina. The late afternoon sun filtered through the windows, casting warm patterns on the worn oak surface, where their homework and scattered crayons lay forgotten. Quinn and Sloane, my beautiful, fierce twin daughters, stood across from me, their faces hard and unfamiliar, as if I was a stranger they were forced to tolerate. "I'm serious, Marin," Sloane said, her voice barely above a whisper but cold as ice. "You're not our real mom." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Maybe I was dreaming, or worse, that this was some cruel joke. But no, the same truth echoed back from two pairs of young, stubborn eyes. I swallowed hard. My throat was tight, and my chest burned. How do you respond to something like that? I wanted to cry out, to scream, to beg them to understand, to remind them that I carried their dreams and fears, wiped their tears when they fell asleep after nightmares, stayed up late nursing fevers, and cheered louder than anyone at their school plays. I was the one who read them bedtime stories every night, even when my heart ached from exhaustion and pain. But they weren't hearing me. The seed of doubt had been planted long before that day, watered by the presence of their biological father, my ex-husband Declan. I never imagined Declan would come back into our lives after all these years. Our divorce had been bitter and final, a quiet acknowledgement that some loves just don't survive the weight of silence and secrets. When we made the decision to have children, we knew I couldn't carry a baby. The diagnosis was clear. Infertility wasn't a mystery for us. But that didn't stop us. We chose surrogacy. The process was long, painful, and expensive. We found a surrogate mother named Lila, a kind woman from Tennessee, who carried Quinn and Sloane for us. When they were born, I cried tears I didn't know I had, holding those tiny hands and whispering promises I intended to keep for the rest of my life. For 12 years, I was their mother in every way that mattered. I watched them grow from tiny infants into curious, witty girls with dreams bigger than this little town. I packed their lunches, attended every parent-teacher conference, and stayed up late helping with math homework that made me want to tear my hair out. I fought for them when they were bullied, celebrated their victories, and tried to teach them how to be strong in a world that isn't always kind. And for 12 years, I believed our family was unbreakable. But then Declan reappeared. He walked back into their lives like a ghost from a past I had buried deep, charming, confident, and full of promises. He brought gifts, new stories, and questions that unsettled Quinn and Sloane. Slowly, I watched their eyes flicker with confusion and longing for something I couldn't give them, the biological link to their father. And I understood, in a way I never wanted to, they needed to know where they came from, who they really were. But the moment they confronted me with those 4 words, I felt my world shatter. "You're not our real mom." They said it as if it was a verdict, a final judgment. The love and years we shared suddenly felt fragile, like a house built on sand. I wanted to reach out, to explain, to hold them and tell them that motherhood is more than DNA. It's about being there in every moment. But all I could do was sit there, silent and broken, while they walked away, leaving me with the cold, unbearable truth that sometimes love isn't enough to hold a family together. The days after that moment felt like I was walking through a thick fog. Everything was blurred, muted, and heavy. Quinn and Sloane barely looked at me, their smiles replaced by a guarded distance I didn't know how to breach. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, had turned cold and silent, like a museum holding memories that were slowly fading. I found myself replaying every moment in my head, trying to understand when the fracture began. Was it the day Declan showed up at their school event, charming the teachers and handing out expensive gifts? Or when he started taking them for weekend visits, filling their heads with stories about their real family? I had no idea how much space I was losing in their hearts until those words crashed down on me like a storm. Declan and I met when we were just kids ourselves, wild souls tangled in the bohemian culture of Portland, Oregon. We dreamed big and reckless back then, believing love was enough to conquer anything. But as the years passed, Our dreams clashed, and bitterness seeped into the cracks of our relationship. When the diagnosis came, when I learned I couldn't carry a child, it felt like the last thread holding us together snapped. Declan retreated, angry and confused, and soon after, the divorce papers arrived. Still, we never imagined the future would pull us back into this tangled mess. I remember the first time I met the surrogate mother, Lila. She was everything I wasn't, calm, grounded, and filled with quiet strength. She carried Quinn and Sloane with grace, and we stayed in touch during the pregnancy, sharing ultrasounds and hopeful dreams. The day they were born, I felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude and love. They were mine. They had my heart. For years, I poured every ounce of myself into being the mother they deserved. I never pretended to be perfect, but I was present. Always. Yet, Declan's return opened a door I thought was sealed forever. He wanted a relationship with our daughters, not as a threat, but as a right. And in that, I understood the confusion they felt. They were caught between two worlds, the family they knew and the biology that called to them from the shadows. One evening after dinner, Quinn asked me quietly, "Why didn't you tell us the truth?" I wanted to shout, to scream that I did tell them. The truth was all around us. But I couldn't find the words. Instead, I held her hand and said, "Because I wanted to protect you. Because I wanted you to feel loved, no matter what." But protection wasn't enough anymore. Every night after they went to bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the walls lined with family photos of birthdays, holidays, school plays, all moments I thought would be our forever. And I grieved. Grieved for the family we were losing. Grieved for the daughters who were slipping away. And grieved for the woman I thought I was. Yet, even in that darkness, a small voice inside me refused to give up. I told myself I would fight, not for the past, but for whatever future was left to reclaim. Because love, I realized, is not just about holding on. Sometimes, it's about learning when to let go and how to rise from the ashes stronger than before. Declan walked back into our lives like a sudden storm tearing through a calm sky, unpredictable, fierce, and impossible to ignore. I remember the day he showed up unannounced at Quinn and Sloane's school recital. I was in the front row, clapping loudly, tears in my eyes as they performed a duet perfectly in sync. Then I saw him, standing at the back of the auditorium, leaning casually against the wall, a half-smile playing on his lips. It was like he'd never left. For a moment, I froze. Years of silence, anger, and heartbreak swirled inside me. Declan's presence was a reminder of everything I thought I had left behind. But what struck me most was how natural he seemed with the girls. The way Quinn's eyes lit up when she spotted him, or how Sloane suddenly seemed more relaxed, her usual guardedness slipping just a bit. He came over after the show, a casual smile masking the tension between us. "Hey, Marin," he said, voice smooth and calm. "They did amazing." I nodded, unsure whether to thank him or ask why he was here after all this time. Declan had changed. He was successful now, a tech entrepreneur living in San Francisco. His life was full of fast cars, late-night meetings, and endless travel. But now, with Quinn and Sloane, he wanted to rewrite his story. He began calling more often, sending thoughtful gifts, and inviting the girls to weekend visits. At first, Quinn and Sloane were hesitant, but slowly, they started looking forward to their time with him. And with every visit, the distance between us grew. One night, I confronted him at our kitchen table. The clock ticked loudly in the quiet room, shadows stretching across the floor. "Declan, what do you want from them?" I asked, voice barely steady. He looked me in the eyes and said something I didn't expect. "I want to be their father. I want them to know who I am, who they really are." His words were honest, but they cut through me like a knife. I understood where he was coming from, the need to belong, to connect. But his timing was cruel, and the way he inserted himself into their lives shattered the fragile peace I'd been holding on to. The girls began asking questions I didn't have answers for. "Why didn't you tell us about him?" Quinn demanded one evening, her voice trembling with hurt. "I wanted to protect you," I replied softly. "I wanted you to feel loved by the family we built." But protection wasn't enough. The truth had a way of breaking through, no matter how tightly you tried to hold it back. As the weeks passed, The tension in the house became unbearable. Quinn and Sloane were torn between two worlds, and I was caught in the middle, desperately trying to keep us all together. One night, I overheard them whispering in their room, words I never wanted to hear. "She's not our real mom," Sloane said quietly. My heart shattered all over again. I realized then that our family would never be the same. But I also knew I had a choice, to crumble under the weight of betrayal or to find strength in the storm. And I chose strength. The silence between Quinn, Sloane, and me grew heavier by the day, like an invisible wall slowly rising and blocking every word, every touch. I felt it in the way they avoided eye contact, in their cold, clipped responses whenever I tried to talk. It was like I was living with two strangers who knew all my secrets but didn't trust me enough to stay. One evening, after a long day at work, I came home to find the house eerily quiet. I called their names but only heard muffled whispers from their shared bedroom. My heart sank. I stood outside their door, hesitant, then pushed it open just enough to peek inside. They were sitting on their beds, backs turned to each other, but their voices were low and urgent. "You don't think Mom's hiding stuff from us?" Quinn asked, a flicker of anger in her eyes. "I know she is," Sloane replied. "Why else wouldn't she tell us the truth about Dad?" It was like a slap in the face. I didn't knock or call out. I just stood there, feeling the weight of their distrust like a physical blow. I realized then that the chasm between us wasn't just about biology. It was about secrets, half-truths, and the unbearable feeling of betrayal. That night, I tried again to reach out. I sat them down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared countless meals, homework sessions, and bedtime talks. I looked into their eyes and said, "I'm sorry if I made you feel like I wasn't honest. I never wanted to hurt you." Quinn's lips pressed into a thin line. "Why didn't you tell us from the start? Why did we have to find out like this?" I took a deep breath, fighting the lump in my throat. "Because I was scared. Scared you'd think I wasn't your mom, that you'd love me less. But that was wrong. You deserve the truth." Sloane's eyes glistened with tears. We don't know who to trust anymore. That was the breaking point. I realized that no matter how much love I gave, some wounds needed time to heal, and some relationships might never return to what they once were. But giving up? That was never an option. I decided then to focus on rebuilding my life, on finding strength beyond the pain. I threw myself into my career, launching a small design studio in downtown Asheville. The work gave me purpose and a way to channel my emotions into something positive. Still, every evening when the house was silent and the world outside faded, I felt the ache of loss. The family I fought so hard to create was slipping away. But in that ache, I found a new resolve. I wasn't just a mother. I was a woman with dreams, ambitions, and the power to redefine my own story. In the weeks that followed, the distance between Quinn, Sloane, and me didn't just linger. It widened into an unbridgeable gap. It was in the way they stopped sharing their days with me, the way they closed their doors a little harder when I entered the room, and the sharpness in their voices when I tried to get close. Every attempt I made to reconnect seemed to push them further away. I remember one afternoon, just after school. I had baked their favorite lemon bars, hoping the sweet smell would soften the cold atmosphere in the house. I called them down from their rooms with a gentle voice. "Hey, I made something for you." Quinn appeared first, hesitated, then took a lemon bar. She didn't say a word but sat across the table from me. Sloane didn't come down. Later, I found out she was texting Declan, ignoring everything else. Declan's presence was no longer just a shadow lurking at the edges of our family life. It had become a competing force pulling the girls toward a future I no longer controlled. The weekends they spent with him were longer, filled with new experiences and promises I couldn't match. I felt powerless watching them slip away, torn between anger, sadness, and guilt. Was I wrong to keep them from knowing their biological father? Had I been selfish, clinging too tightly to a family that wasn't fully mine by blood? One evening, I sat down with Declan after a school event. The tension between us was thick, a mix of old wounds and new battles. "I want what's best for them," he said quietly, "but sometimes I wonder if they'll ever really see you as their mom." His words stung. They echoed my own fears. I looked him in the eyes and said, "I've been their mom since day one. I raised them, loved them, fought for them. But maybe love isn't always enough. Back at home, Quinn and Sloane's conversations changed. They spoke less of mom and more about their real dad. Their identities were shifting beneath my feet, and I wasn't sure where I fit anymore. One night, Quinn said, "Mom, do you think Dad and you could ever just be okay?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and said, "I don't know, sweetheart. But I'll always want you to be happy." She nodded, but I saw the sadness behind her eyes, the sadness of a child caught between two worlds. Despite the pain, I refused to let bitterness consume me. I focused on building my business, finding joy in small victories, and surrounding myself with friends who reminded me of my worth. Slowly, I began to understand that my happiness could not depend solely on my daughter's acceptance. I needed to find it within myself first. But even as I rebuilt, I felt the weight of a family fractured, the kind of weight that leaves scars no matter how much time passes. The tension in the house was like a silent storm, always there, pressing down, impossible to ignore. Quinn and Sloane no longer sought my company the way they used to. They communicated in clipped sentences, and when they did speak, it was often about their plans with Declan or their frustrations about being stuck in the middle. One afternoon, I overheard them arguing in their room. The words cut deep. "Mom's never going to understand," Quinn said, her voice sharp with resentment. "She's not our mother," Sloane insisted, her tone colder than I expected. I wanted to knock, to tell them how wrong they were, but I stayed quiet. I realized that whatever bridges I'd built were crumbling beneath my feet. At work, I threw myself into my design studio. Clients, projects, deadlines. It was a refuge from the chaos at home. The late nights and endless brainstorming sessions became my new normal. But even surrounded by success, a hollow ache lingered inside. One evening, after finishing a presentation, I sat alone on my balcony overlooking Asheville's twinkling lights. I let the cool mountain air wash over me as I thought about what I had lost and what I still hoped to save. The breaking point came unexpectedly. Quinn invited Declan to our house for dinner, without telling me. I came home to find him sitting at our kitchen table, chatting easily with the girls, laughter filling the room. For a moment, I was invisible, a ghost in my own home. Later, when the girls went to bed, I confronted Quinn. "Why didn't you tell me Declan was here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She looked at me with a mix of defiance and guilt. "I wanted us to have a normal family dinner." "Is that so wrong?" Her words hit me harder than anything else. I realized that the family I dreamed of, the one I fought so hard to keep, was no longer mine to hold. The girls were choosing their own path, and I had to respect that, even if it meant stepping back. That night, I wrote in my journal, the one place where I could be completely honest with myself. I am not just a mother. I am a woman with my own life, my own dreams. The past may have broken us, but it will not define me. And for the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, I could find peace on my own terms. After the dinner with Declan, the house felt different, not just in the silence or the distance, but in the air itself. Something had shifted, like the last thread holding us together had frayed and finally snapped. I knew I couldn't force them to love me, but I had to try one last time to reach Quinn and Sloane. One Saturday morning, I sat them down at the breakfast table. The light from the big windows warmed the room, but inside me, a cold knot twisted tighter with every word I rehearsed. "Girls," I began, "I know things haven't been easy. I know you're confused and hurt. But I want you to know something important. No matter what, I have always loved you. You are my daughters." Quinn looked away, and Sloane bit her lip. The silence stretched longer than I could bear. "I know I'm not your biological mother," I said carefully, "but I was the one who carried you in my heart every day. I've held you when you cried, fought for you when you needed me. That doesn't change." Quinn's eyes finally met mine, and I saw something flicker, maybe doubt, maybe pain, but also something softer. "We love you, Mom," she said quietly. "But it's hard. We're trying to figure out who we are." Sloane nodded, tears welling up. "We don't want to hurt you. We just need time." It wasn't the full reconciliation I'd hoped for, but it was something. a fragile thread of connection. I told them I would wait, that I was here whenever they were ready. That day marked a turning point for me. I realized that motherhood isn't just about biology or even daily presence. It's about unconditional love. And sometimes, that love requires patience, humility, and letting go of control. In the months that followed, I focused on my own growth. My design studio flourished, and I began mentoring young women in Asheville who wanted to start their own businesses. Helping others gave me a new sense of purpose and healing. But the distance with my daughters remained, a silent reminder of what we lost. Still, I held on to hope, not that we would return to the family we once were, but that we could find a new kind of peace. Months turned into a year, and the fragile truce I had found with Quinn and Sloane began to feel like a distant dream. Our interactions were polite but distant, a series of polite nods, brief texts, and forced smiles at family events. The girls were growing up, exploring their identities, and slowly carving out lives where I was more of a shadow than a presence. Declan, meanwhile, continued to build his relationship with them. He was the fun dad, the one who took them to concerts, bought them the latest gadgets, and filled their weekends with adventure. I watched from the sidelines, a quiet observer in the story of my own children. One evening, after a particularly cold Thanksgiving dinner, Quinn approached me quietly. "Mom," she said, her voice tentative, "I think we need some space. We're trying to understand who we are, and it's complicated." Sloane nodded in agreement, her eyes avoiding mine. It felt like the final door closing. That night, alone in my studio, I let the tears fall freely for the first time in years. The pain was sharp and deep, the ache of love unreturned, of a family fractured beyond repair. But as I wiped my eyes, a quiet voice inside me spoke. "This is not the end. This is your beginning." I made a choice to stop fighting for a family that wasn't fully mine and start building a life that belonged to me. I threw myself into my work, expanding my design studio into a boutique agency with clients across the country. I traveled for conferences, networked with inspiring women entrepreneurs, and rediscovered passions I'd buried beneath the weight of motherhood. I also began volunteering at a local women's shelter, helping mothers who, like me, had faced unexpected challenges and heartbreak. Their stories gave me perspective and reminded me that dignity and strength come from within, no matter the circumstances. Still, I never stopped loving Quinn and Sloane. But I learned that love isn't always about closeness. Sometimes it's about respect, distance, and acceptance. And slowly, I started to find peace. By now, Quinn and Sloane had clearly chosen their own path, one where I was increasingly a figure from their past, not their present or future. The final blow came unexpectedly, during a summer family gathering at my parents' lake house in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I had invited them both, hoping for a moment of connection, a chance to create new memories. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the water as we sat around the fire pit, roasting marshmallows. For a while, it seemed like we might find a fragile peace. Then, out of nowhere, Quinn looked at me with cold eyes and said, "You know, sometimes I wonder if you were ever really our mom." Sloane nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were never honest with us. We deserved the truth from the start." The words hit me like a punch to the chest, knocking the breath out of me. My heart shattered in a way that no therapy or time could fix. I wanted to scream, to cry, to beg them to understand. But all I could do was sit there, tears streaming down my face, as the family I had built crumbled around me. That night, I lay awake, replaying their words over and over. The betrayal, the distance, the coldness, it all felt unbearable. But then, somewhere deep inside, a spark of defiance flickered. I realized that dignity isn't given, it's taken. And no matter how painful, I would not let this moment define me. The next morning, I stood by the lake, watching the mist rise off the water. I made a vow to myself, to rise from the ashes, to be whole again, not because of them, but because of me. I focused on my business, my friends, and my own growth. I found strength in solitude and joy in new adventures. The pain remained, but it no longer controlled me. And in that moment of heartbreak, I found a new kind of freedom, the freedom to live for myself. Years have passed since that fateful summer at the lake house, Years of silence, distance, and quiet acceptance. Quinn and Sloane have built their own lives separate from mine, and I've built mine from the ground up. My design studio flourished beyond my wildest dreams, evolving into a respected boutique agency known for bold creativity and fierce independence. I travel often now, speaking at conferences, mentoring young women, and living a life I never thought possible. But success isn't the only thing that defines me. It's the peace I've found within, a peace born from pain, heartbreak, and ultimately, self-love. I learned that family isn't always defined by blood or shared history. Sometimes, it's about the courage to let go, to accept what cannot be changed, and to honor yourself above all else. Occasionally, I hear from Quinn or Sloane, a brief text on a birthday, a photo from a vacation, a fleeting message. We remain distant, but there's no bitterness. Only quiet understanding. I'm no longer the woman desperate to hold on to a family that slipped through her fingers. I am whole, strong, and free. The truth they once rejected, that I loved them fiercely, that I was their mother in every way that mattered, remains my quiet, unbreakable foundation. And with that truth, I stand tall.